I think we're live. We are live. Greetings, everybody. This is Pastor Scott Lively with First Century Bible Church. My wife, Ann. We're here for our continuing series through the Bible. And under our program, Freestyle Bible Study, we like to just read through the scripture and then have a conversational discussion and analysis of what we've read, along with our friends in the chat room. That includes Don, who says, "Hey, Don." That was the greeting in Mayberry. That's right. That was the greeting in Mayberry. Hey. Anyway, let's go ahead and open in prayer. Father in heaven, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We thank you for this opportunity to come together in fellowship the day before we celebrate your resurrection. And Lord, I pray that you would guide us through your word today, and that you would be a blessing, or that you would bless us, and that we would be a blessing to those around us. In your name, amen.
Amen.
So Doug has joined us. Happy Resurrection Sunday.
Happy Resurrection Day, and those of you who like to call it Easter.
Yes, Easter.
Tomorrow, because we can't be with you.
Yeah, so early grade. Now, we just, it doesn't matter what day it is in the year. When the Bible study comes, we just pick up from where we left off the time before. And that puts us today in 1 Kings chapter 5 and 6, and perhaps in 7. But anyway, this is, we'll find a way to segue to the resurrection, perhaps.
Well, Jesus said, destroy this temple and I will build it up again in 3 days.
There you go. There you go. This is actually the temple that he's, oh, wait a minute. No.
Well, an iteration of it.
Yeah, well, it's
they never deviated too far from the original plan, did they?
Well, actually, they were, when the second temple was built, everyone cried that it was so because it was so much less of a structure than the first one. But we'll get into that discussion after we read some of the verses. But I've titled this show Solomon's Slave-Built Temple, and we'll talk about the meaning of that too as we go along. But let's go ahead and start reading 5 apiece.
Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon because he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father. For Hiram had always loved David. Then Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, you know how my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God, because of the wars which were fought against him on every side, until the Lord put his foes under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor evil occurrence. And behold, I propose to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord spoke to my father David, saying, your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, he shall build the house for my name.
Now, therefore, command that they cut for me cedars from Lebanon, and my servants will be with your servants, and I will give you wages for your servants according to all that you say. For you know that there is no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. It came about when Hiram heard the words of Solomon that he rejoiced greatly and said, blessed be the Lord today, who has given to David a wise son over this great people. So Hiram sent word to Solomon, saying, I have heard the message which you have sent me. I will do what you desire concerning the cedar and cypress timber. My servants will bring them down from Lebanon to the sea, and I will make them into rafts to go by sea to the place where you direct me, and I will have them broken up there, and you shall carry them away. Then you shall accomplish my desire by giving food to my household. So Hiram gave Solomon as much as he desired of the cedar and cypress timber. So
You want to finish that so that the whole bargain is finished.
Okay. Solomon then gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household and 20 cores of beaten oil. Thus Solomon would give Hiram year by year. So there we are. We have now the beginning of the building of the temple. And as always, whenever I contemplate this topic and the change in the power structure, the shift from the house of Israel to the house of Judah, it always comes with a reminder that the temple was not God's idea. It was man's idea. God's idea was the tabernacle, and God's idea was a republic, the self-determination under the rule of law. And the Hebrews rejected both of those things in favor of a monarchy and a temple, modeling themselves on the people of the world. And there was really probably no more worldly person at the time than King Hiram, right? Who was the king of Tyre, where these were the original Canaanites, right? The Sidon and Tyre were the cities established by the very early. They were like the first generation after Canaan, when he was banished from the presence of Noah, and those two cities always were Canaanite, and they were involved in demon worship. They had the Temple of Baal was in Tyre, and the Sidonians that are being praised here for being such great lumberjacks were demon worshippers also. And then we'll see as time goes on and Solomon drifts further and further away from his anchor in the truth of God, he begins bringing in all these various practices that eventually cause him to lose the kingdom. And but so the beginning of all that is this. Hiram is mentioned favorably here, and in terms of being another world leader, he seems to be honorable. You can do business with him, fair-minded. He was a friend to David, so there's some pluses on his side, but at the same time, this is moving the Hebrew people away from what God had wanted for them into what they want for themselves, and God's going along with it. Sort of.
Well, you notice that Hiram does say, "Blessed be the Lord this day, for he has given David a wise son over this great people." Yeah. So he honors maybe just the Hebrew God from a distance or something, but there's clearly a very respectful, if not worshipful statement.
Yeah. And he's clearly, he seems to be a much more honorable man than Ethbaal, who will come along much later, whose daughter Jezebel becomes the wife of Ahab, leading the northern kingdom at that point into outright Satan worship. At this stage, they still have a Yahweh-centered society in Jerusalem. They're living in great prosperity as a result of David's conquest of all the enemies, and they're a lot is going well, but the seeds of Solomon's overthrow are already being planted here, and the sort of the shade. There's shade on the building project of the Lord's temple, and that the connection is not clean, right? They're sort of like spiritually unclean hands at work in the process. But Dot's joined us also.
You notice that God doesn't refer to this thing as a temple. Yeah. He refers to it as a house. Yeah. And it's not a house for him. It's a house for his name.
Right. Yeah. That's a very important distinction.
all of the
Yeah.
pagans believed that when they built a temple, it was for the actual presence of the deity, that the god would come down and live in the temple.
Like the God the Father did in the tabernacle when he led them through the wilderness. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Well,
in that case,
in
his
a
presence
form,
was movable, right?
Right.
And he would inhabit
Right.
the tabernacle when he felt like it.
Yeah.
But
But
otherwise,
so it was sort of a dwelling of God in a very in a manifestation of God that he controlled. It wasn't his entire
right,
purpose.
because he wanted to dwell in the midst of his people during
Right.
this whole time of kind of bonding them to him.
Yeah.
But it was in no way a fixed or permanent.
But still, it was much closer to
Right.
to
And it
a
might have been one
actual.
of those accommodations with them that he made for the semi-pagan people who had just come out of Egypt. And you have to remember too that the statues that they put in their temples in the pagan cultures were supposed to be, in some way,
The manifestation of the
Right.
of the little G God.
That we experienced some of this in Springfield where we used to live, where they would take we had several. Were they Buddhist?
Oh yeah, it was a Buddhist temple.
There was a couple of. Were there a couple of temples or just the one?
No, it's just there was one. They took over an old funeral home.
And they would have
Fittingly
images
enough.
out in front of the Buddha or whoever, and they would put actual fruit from the grocery store on the image.
Yeah, they bought this big funeral home, like 3 stories tall, fairly, sizable building, nice building, and then they just filled the whole property with statuary, Buddhist statuary, and some of them were kind of sort of creepy looking, but and then they did sacrifices. They had
They
fruit
put
and
whole
stuff.
melons and bunches of bananas and things. And then since they happened to occupy the hood where we were located, the fruit often disappeared. And I always wondered if they thought
people thought it was quite bad for them.
The presence of the deity had consumed the fruit.
Yeah, I remember they started putting in some sort of a pool, reflecting pool or something, and the city stopped them because they didn't have the permits or something. Anyway, it was an interesting neighborhood. We also had a Farrakhan sort of temple, quote unquote,
They didn't
church
offer
/
any
temple.
fruit.
No, that didn't offer anything really. You couldn't even see through the windows in that place. But and then what else was there? There was a variety of Christian churches.
We're not edifying anybody.
No, that's true. Okay, that's true. All right. So there we are with the beginning of the building of the temple. And what I appreciate also is just in terms of the craftsman in me working with materials, the fact that they are just like they do today. They make rafts of logs and float them down the rivers.
Yeah, that is very interesting that he's so specific about his technology and how he's going to bring this off.
Yeah, we're getting great insights into how this works, and when you go to the Middle East now, there's no trees, just practically anywhere. There's no trees,
especially no cedars.
But it isn't because of this. It wasn't that they just logged it all off and didn't plant it back. What I have heard is that the Muslims taxed the trees as a revenue device, and so everybody cut them down so they wouldn't have to pay taxes on them. So it was bad public policy that sort of led to the complete defoliation, because you don't see. But in contrast to that, Israel, when the Jews reclaimed the territory or were gifted it back after the British liberated it from the Muslims, the Ottoman Turks, they moved in and they began replanting the whole territory. And
Yeah,
really,
that's
it's
one of the things you can do when you go on
and we
a
did.
tour.
Yeah.
Right, they give you a tree to plant.
Yeah, we each planted a tree. On our very first trip over there as a group of pastors, our first tour of Israel, led by Rosemary Schindler, interestingly enough, grandniece of Oscar Schindler, and we, well, she managed the whole thing. She wasn't there with us all the time, but um, we each planted a tree in a forest there. I took some pictures of the landscape just to be able to identify exactly where it was, exactly where my tree was. And I left a couple of coins in the rocks right next to it. So if I ever went back, I would be able to find my tree that I planted.
Assuming nobody needed those coins.
No, they were sort of stuck in the cleft. But anyway, that's another rabbit trail. But anyway, let's go ahead and read the next. And starting with
I thought there might be one more
point to make.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how Solomon sort of whitewashes the reason for David's inability to build the house for the name of the Lord. He says, because of the wars which were fought against him on every side.
Right.
Well, the
God
Lord
didn't
was
say that.
very
That's right.
specific about
You are a man of war.
a man of bloodshed.
Yeah.
So he's kind of running a PR campaign for David.
Yeah, that's true. That's very interesting. It is
not his fault.
Yeah.
He just had too many people coming against him.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's true.
David's personality that God was holding up as unacceptable,
unfitting. For building a house for the name of God.
Right.
And that's a very important point. Dot says, "Happy Resurrection, Easter, blessed Sunday tomorrow." Same to you, Dot. God bless you. Let's read the next batch, starting with verse 12.
12. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he had promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty together. Then King Solomon raised up a labor force out of all Israel, and the labor force was 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. They were 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the labor force. Solomon had 70,000 who carried burdens and 80,000 who quarried stone in the mountains, besides 3,300 from the chiefs of Solomon's deputies who supervised the people who labored in the work.
Then the king commanded, and they quarried great stones, costly stones, to lay the foundations of the house with cut stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders and the Gebalites cut them and prepared the timbers and the stones to build the house. And we'll stop there and discuss this part. Now, my Bible says forced laborers.
Well, that would make sense. I believe this is like a conscription. Remember, in actually right up until the modern era in Europe.
It is called a conscription in my version.
Yeah, in Europe, part of the job of a nobleman was to provide soldiers for the king. And so if a war broke out, he was to force the people in his jurisdiction to serve under penalty of, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think this is very similar, that these are not, I read several commentaries where they thought they were, foreign slaves or something. These seem to be Israelis.
Right. And they're being forced. And one of the notes in my Bible makes the point, and not, which I would have made anyway, is that this becomes the one of the causes of civil war later. Is that, and this is in contrast to the Israelite Republic, because everything was voluntary under the Israelite Republic.
Right.
Now there were expectations, and the warlords probably acted to a degree the same as these under the monarchy, but here it's much more heavy-handed. It's completely centralized government. They no longer have the rule, self-determination under the rule of law, self-determination to a point under the law. They are now under the absolute despotic control of Solomon, who is benign, right? He's, for the most part, his emphasis is on public works, and the first one being the house for the Lord's name. And so there are positive aspects to this, but nevertheless, this is forced labor.
Just like Samuel said, it would be. Remember in the early
That's right.
prophetic statements that he made about what a king would do to the people of Israel if they refused to continue the republic.
Yes.
You'll take your young men and force them into service. And so that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
But he's trying to be, you can tell he's trying to be benign in that he lets them have 2 months at home and then go back to work.
Yeah. This is in
for 1 month.
I'm completing right now, very close to having it done, volume 2 of Dynasty of Darkness, and which is basically the history of Satan's Antichrist in the world. The first volume deals with the Antichrist from the ancient world through the time of the Bible, especially, and I listed a set of 6 criteria that really define the character qualities of the Antichrist figures, and one of those criteria is armies of slave laborers employed to build monuments to the leader himself. Now that's not happening here. There's yes, you do have forced labor, but here this is for the house of God, and for public work projects after that. So it's not quite the same, but it's still it's sort of getting uncomfortably close to a sort of a satanic theme.
Well, anytime you're being forced to work and not given a choice,
slavery.
There's your freedom, right?
Slavery. It's a form of slavery by your own king. But as Anne recalled, that is exactly what Samuel warned was going to happen. He was making his pitch, saying, "Don't do this. You're not going to like this. So all these things are going to happen when you bring in a monarchy." And of course, they have all happened now, and now it's happening in spades with Solomon. So, anyway, just bringing that in.
The other thing I wanted to bring out, this will come out more in the next chapter, but these people, I mean, this amazing number of people, 30,000 people working
those are huge.
to quarry and carry stone. And the suggestion is that they are hewing each stone in the mountains to a certain
and we'll see
prefab pattern that will then fit exactly into the temple.
Yeah, they've been given measurements, and they're doing this so that there will be, and we haven't read it yet, so there will not be any construction noises in the temple itself.
Which, I mean, imagine the scale of this endeavor for people that didn't
and
have.
Some of these stones, Anne and I have been at least twice to the excavations alongside the western wall, the retaining wall that basically is that we've talked about this before. The Temple Mount is a building, and of which the roof of the building is what you walk on up there, and where you go and you look at the mosque and the Dome of the Rock and all that. You're walking on the roof of a building that's built, rectangular building is built around the mountain, Mount Moriah, and the mountain sort of rises up, and when you're walking on the roof, the dome of the rock is exposed at the top, but there are walls on the sides that are significant, and they go down below the ground, and they go. When we first went there, they were just in the beginning of the process of excavating. Like when you stand facing east, facing what's called the Wailing Wall, and you know all the Orthodox Jews are there and all that. To the left, right, the Muslim quarter of the city is right to your left, you know, at a higher level, but under the Israelis started digging under the city, and when we went there, it was only went like 100 yards or something the very first time that we were there, and it was the women's section where they would go to pray along the wall. Well, when we went back the last time we were there in 2017, they had excavated all the way, and they had excavated three stories deep. There are, and you could stand at various places where there were big holes, and you could actually see down all 3 stories and see where the pillars and the rooms were. Right, and it was an enormously interesting area, and there was pools. It was huge, and there's whole tours now that will take you through it. And we went on one with a group. You know, they just make a group out of you when you show up at the entrance of the thing. You pay a fee, and then they take you down there. But the point that I'm making is, when we got down in there, there's one particular place where they take you. There were stones there that were as big as our house, right? They were as big as our house. They were maybe 14, 18 feet tall, 30, 50 feet long, right? These are single blocks of rock that were laid one after the other, and just incredible feat of engineering to be able to have done that, and to have brought them from the mountains and all that. So that's what, you know, why they needed all these people. They're basically
it's almost a miraculous achievement for those times.
Yeah, really.
They were using wooden and stone tools, and I don't know how much metal they had that would be sturdy enough to hack away a rock.
Yeah, there are techniques that they suggest were probably what they did, but anyway,
use pressure flaking and things like that. But man, something that size.
I know it's very very impressive. But anyway, so we've been to the Temple Mount, and we've been up on it several times. We actually were up there one time when there's always guards up there, Muslims there the first time, and for some reason he left, and so we went down to the east gate, which you're not supposed to go down to, and we climbed all the way down there, and we're down right at the gate, and then the guy comes back with his son.
Jesus is supposed to come through.
Right. That's the prophecy, is he will come through the east gate, from the direction of the Temple Mount. And so what the Muslims have done is they blocked it all off, and they put a graveyard on the outside, because they would make him unclean to have to walk over a graveyard. But
they think Jesus wouldn't walk over a graveyard.
And they think somehow they're going to stop the entrance of Jesus into the city. But the fact that they've done all that is indicates that they know that he's real. Right? So, well, actually, they do know that he's real,
and that he's coming back.
And he's coming back. But anyway, okay, let's go and get started in chapter 6.
I just, I'm still, my mind boggles at all this. How would they do this? Each stone would have to be numbered for where it was to go. And
yeah.
Think of how many there would have to be, and it just it was an amazing undertaking. So,
Yeah. So, but they have done, the ancient world. I mean, look at the pyramids. I mean,
I don't think
they've
the
been doing
pyramids compared to this.
no, but in terms of the craft, right? Well, that's where Freemasonry comes from. This whole thing. The Freemasonry claims Solomon as Solomon's Israel as the origin of its secret society, and in terms of
The plans weren't his. That's the interesting part.
he's following the model of the temple in Tyre.
That David gave him. That's going to come out in Chronicles, which
Well, at least the two pillars that they put in there. But no, they did follow.
well,
We'll see
I'll
both.
read you Chronicles, which is the
Yeah, there are
context of
there are-
this.
the design is drawn from multiple places, these two places, but including the temple of Baal in Tyre. But anyway, you ready to do 6?
I am ready. And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Now the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, its length was 60 cubits, its width 20, and its height 30 cubits. The vestibule in front of the sanctuary of the house was 20 cubits long across the width of the house, and the width of the vestibule extended 10 cubits from the front of the house. And he made for the house windows with beveled frames. Against the wall of the temple, he built chambers all around, against the walls of the temple, all around the sanctuary and the inner sanctuary. Thus he made side chambers all around it.
The lowest story was 5 cubits wide, and the middle was 6 cubits wide, and the third was 7 cubits wide. For on the outside he made offsets in the wall of the house all around, in order that the beams would not be inserted in the walls of the house. The house, while it was being built, was built of stone, prepared at the quarry, and there was neither hammer nor axe nor any iron tool heard in the house while it was being built. The doorway for the lowest side chamber was on the right side of the house, and they would go up by winding stairs to the middle story, and from the middle to the third. So he built the house and finished it, and he covered the house with beams and planks of cedar. He also built the stories against the whole house, each 5 cubits high, and they were fastened to the house with timbers of cedar. Now, let's leave it off there. And so he's essentially, the beams are being put on ledges instead of being inserted in the wall. So the design is has this sort of step up, and each having a ledge for holding the beams. So interesting construction.
The same idea as these are hewn stones, but they're not touched in any other way. They're sort of supposed to be like living stones. So they don't want them drilled or penetrated with any kind of, metal fastening or wood beam or anything. Everything has to
Sort
be
of a hybrid.
perfectly intact.
Yeah. They are cutting them. Remember, that's the instructions for the altars for God, is he wanted them made from unhewn stones. One of the first things I ever learned from, I'd had interaction with Jewish rabbis before, but watching an episode of Glenn Beck on Fox News back when he was on there at his regular show. He had Daniel Lapin on, who was just a short comment when he talked about the Nimrod's construction. They made bricks, and that there was a major spiritual point of distinction, that bricks represent sort of this artificiality, total conformity, but God's building materials were unhewn stones, each one unique, separate, distinct. So what the devil does in creating the artificial world is, and what you see in society today, in the demonic culture we're living in, everyone is being forced to be the same. Groupthink. There's every child is, they're attempting to shape every child in the exact same way. They talk about multiculturalism, but really what they're talking about is one culture, everyone being forced to do it.
And you can turn out millions of them.
Right. And so Rabbi Lapin was talking about the distinction between bricks and stones, unhewn stones, as a spiritual principle. I thought it was very profound. Never forgotten it. And this is sort of a version of it. They are cut. These stones are cut. So in that sense, they're hewn, but they're not shaped in any sense except making rectangular blocks. But anyway.
Well, the idea always being that a stone, especially one that is a support stone, represents how human society is arranged in God's eyes, with Jesus being the cornerstone and other things balancing or depending on that center stone. And he also talked about God can raise up for himself of these stones, children unto I've forgotten the last part of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, the idea is that stones are almost the equivalent of what he does with us, that he makes the stones live and builds them up into a structure that then is a magnificent, permanent, perfectly balanced place for him to inhabit, even though he doesn't inhabit this earthly one. And that sort of leads me to how the plan came to David. He tells us in 1 Chronicles 28, because I was wondering, where did they get this big plan? So then David gave his son Solomon, this is verse 11, 1 Chronicles 28. David gave his son Solomon the plans for the vestibule, its houses, its treasures, its upper chambers, its inner chambers, and the place of the mercy seat, and the plans for all that he had by the Spirit of the courts of the house of the Lord, of all the chambers all around, etc., etc. So God gave him all this through the Holy Spirit, and then he talks about later the form that he got it in. I'm trying to, here in the last verse of this section. All this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me all the works of these plans. It means all the details. So I guess it was like the Psalms. David sat there and the Lord dictated and he wrote down the entire plan for the temple.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's really cool to see the workings of this.
Yeah.
And so he must have handed, volumes of detail to Solomon and said, okay, here are the plans for the temple. Go ahead and build it exactly to specifications.
Very good. All right. So Dot says, wow. Yes, I agree. Yeah, that is that's powerful. It's very powerful. We do know that there was um, the two pillars that are put there are specifically drawn from the design of the Temple of Baal.
Yeah, that's Hiram's idea.
Hiram's idea, yeah. And so
Were they a gift from him?
yeah, that's right. They were
the
a gift.
last minute.
And the gift that Solomon gives to Hiram in return for all of his help is the essentially Galilee, the cities, 20 cities, which Hiram really doesn't want. He doesn't like them. And that's essentially the same territory that much later would be known as Galilee of the Gentiles. And I haven't matched it, inch by inch geographically, but I noticed that as I was studying the Bible history at one point. But anyway, what's next? Anything more from that section?
I have always wondered about the door for the middle story being on the right side of the temple. So I'm not sure whether that's for the outer rooms or is that the access to the temple.
The apartments, the houses that you make on there?
It just says the doorway for the middle story. I guess they're talking about the semi-attached buildings or rooms or whatever the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are 30 chambers in the design. We don't. I've never studied it carefully enough to know what they were even for.
I've heard people make guesses that some of them were storerooms and some were places for the priests to live or get dressed or something. That they were just incidental rooms.
There would have had to have been, there would have had to have been utilitarian aspects to this. But I've got a design in my Bible with that shows the layout. You can see that.
I guess they must have. Yeah. I guess they must have pinned down the size by now with the excavations, but I know from the biblical description they don't know exactly how big a cubit was. But now they do.
Yeah. So anyway, good stuff. Let's go, and we're at 442. Let's read from verse 11.
Then the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, concerning this temple which you are building, if you walk in my statutes, execute my judgments, keep all my commandments, and walk in them, then I will perform my word with you, which I spoke to your father David. And I will dwell among you, among the children of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. So Solomon built the temple and finished it, and he built the inside walls of the temple with cedar boards. From the floor of the temple to the ceiling, he paneled the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the temple with planks of cypress.
He built 20 cubits on the rear part of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the ceiling. He built them for it on the inside as inner sanctuary, even as the most holy place. The house, that is the nave in front of the inner sanctuary, was 40 cubits long. There was cedar on the house within, carved in the shape of gourds and open flowers. All was cedar, and there was no stone seen. Then he prepared an inner sanctuary within the house in order to place there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits in length, 20 cubits in width, and 20 cubits in height, and he overlaid it with pure gold. He also overlaid the altar with cedar. So we're getting into the interior design here. No stone is visible on the inside. Yeah. So
that was interesting.
Yeah. So it would have been a soundproof building.
Unlighted too. No windows apparently in
Well, there was windows in some. Remember, he says he had beveled windows.
I think
Where
that's
was
just
that?
in the outside.
Where was that? Verse 6:4. Also for the house he made windows with artistic frames. You said your Bible said beveled. This just says artistic in mine. Let's see. Is anything on that?
I think this one is surrounded with other, building parts. So I don't think there's any light coming in here.
Well, we've got one of the notes in my Bible. The stones were prepared in a quarry that Solomon had on the outskirts of Jerusalem. So the quarry, even though the cedars of Lebanon are being rafted in by sea, the quarry is local.
Right. Remember, that's where you're sending all the 30,000.
Right. So they weren't going all the way up to Lebanon or anywhere to get this. This is all local building materials. Yeah. So.
Well, anyway, this is. I believe that the inner sanctuary was probably lighted just by the lamp, which the priests were responsible for never letting go out.
Right.
So that was the closest thing that represented the presence of God, was that light burning continually in there in the darkness.
Yeah, and it's they still have the Ark of the Covenant. Then it's there. Wow, interesting. I wonder if we will. I wonder if that will be recovered. It may be. When we talked last week, we talked about the copper scroll.
So
Had location.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Anyway, I bought his book, The Door of Hope, My Search for something of this copper scroll. I haven't started reading it yet, but anyway, where did we leave off?
Notice also that the cube that's the inner sanctuary,
right, 20 by 20 by 20,
very similar to the cube that will be ultimately the New Jerusalem, the heavenly city.
Yeah, the perfect cube. Yeah,
and we have all this measuring going on that God always does when he has a holy place. He's very careful to measure it out.
Yeah.
Which if any of you guys have a suggestion about why God does this measuring, I would love to hear it. I've never actually deciphered his reasons for that. I've asked him, why do you do this?
Okay, starting with verse 11. No, wait a minute. No, starting with verse 21.
So Solomon overlaid the inside of the temple with pure gold. He stretched gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with gold. The whole temple he overlaid with gold until he had finished all the temple. Also, he overlaid with gold the entire altar that was by the inner sanctuary. Inside the inner sanctuary, he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One wing of the cherub was 5 cubits, and the other wing of the cherub 5 cubits. 10 cubits from the tip of one wing to the tip of the other. And the other cherub was 10 cubits. Both cherubim were of the same size and shape.
The height of one cherubim was 10 cubits, and so was the other cherub. He placed the cherubim in the midst of the inner house, and the wings of the cherubim were spread out, so that the wing of the one was touching the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub was touching the other wall. So their wings were touching each other in the center of the house. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. Then he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved engravings of cherubim palm trees and open flowers, inner and outer sanctuaries. He overlaid the floor of the house with gold, inner and outer sanctuaries.
It's a lot of gold.
It is. Let's go ahead and read. Let's go ahead and read four more, and I'll read the last three.
Okay. For the entrance of the inner sanctuary, he made doors of olive wood. The lintel and doorposts were 1/5 of the wall. The 2 doors were of olive wood, and he carved on them figures of cherubs. Figures of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold. And he spread gold on the cherubim and on the palm trees. So for the door of the sanctuary, he also made doorposts of olive wood, 1/4 of the wall. And the 2 doors were of cypress wood. 2 panels comprised one folding door, and 2 panels comprised the other folding door.
He carved on it cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and he overlaid them with gold evenly applied on the engraved work. He built the inner court with 3 rows of cut stone and a row of cedar beams. In the 4th year, the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid in the month of Ziv. In the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, the house was finished throughout all its parts and according to all its plans. So he was 7 years in building it. So one Shemitah cycle. Doesn't say whether he started it or whether he kept it within the boundaries of a Shemitah cycle, but 7 years is the time that it took to build.
You could figure it out because it began 4 years after he took power, took up his reign. And we know the year that he started to reign. So then you could.
If you were so inclined.
Yeah, you might be.
I try to avoid the numbers myself. I don't like to get caught up in.
I thought people had already done the Shemitah cycles back.
Yes, probably, and it's just a matter of looking up someone else's work. When it comes to numbers and dates and all that, I always am hesitant to get involved in those kinds of things because there's so many factors in the calculations that I'll leave it to the mathematicians for that, and I'll stick to the things related to logic and reasoning, my stronger area. David Paul Mead has joined us, saying hello, Pastor. Don says it's a replica. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Don. Or maybe that was the tabernacle, he adds later.
We should get out our little Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, I can't do that right now. I'll bring it up.
At least it's got cherubim on it.
Yeah, there it is.
Which in Hebrew is karavim.
Well, yeah, and notably the Ark of the Covenant has cherubim also, but it's not the same as what's designed for the room. So this is someone's depiction.
That's not realistic. That's
Yeah.
not, is it?
I don't think so. I think the cherubim the wings are supposed to be touching.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm not sure they're facing the right way there.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can go on the website for the, what is the name of that? The Temple Institute.
The Temple Institute, yeah.
And you'll see not only this little guy here, but also the altar and all of the service implements that they've created for their rituals and the priest's garments.
They have everything.
Yeah.
They have assembled everything necessary for the temple. They have built the altar for the sacrifice of the red heifers, and as early as this week, they could conceivably sacrifice one of the red heifers to produce the ashes which is using the final step of the cleansing of the priests for the cleansing of the temple. And we don't have a temple, and we don't. My understanding, Ezra 3:6 demonstrates a temple is not necessary for the fulfillment of prophecy. I think there likely is going to be one, but when they came out of Babylon, there was no temple, and yet they began the sacrificial rituals again without one, and that was essentially the holy place, and that's and it's if you look in Revelation, when it's talking about and other places in Scripture, it's talking about the prophecy of when the Antichrist sets up the abomination of desolation. It's in the holy place. It doesn't say temple specifically. It's interpreted as that, but they could probably get away with it. And one more point in line with that is the fact that David had no temple, right? And when the millennial kingdom, Christ will sit on the throne of David. There is no temple in David's Jerusalem. He makes the plans, with the Holy Spirit, but it isn't built till Solomon. So there are plenty of examples of the holy place not being a temple or even the tabernacle. So anyway, I think we're at 4:56. We have four. Oh, Don says the exact measurements are a replica of heaven. When you look in Ezekiel's got the measurements for the temple of the millennial kingdom, and
so does Revelation.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Revelation isn't the one that comes down from heaven after the millennial kingdom.
Right. Yeah, the sequence. I know that some of our supporters have different views. We have some post-millennial believers, but I believe in a future millennial kingdom that's not very far off, and that all this, and I think that I actually think we're on track. I sent out in our snail mail newsletter, I talked about how America is a model of the Israelite Republic. Our Constitution wasn't ratified until the New Hampshire delegation heard a sermon from Reverend Samuel Langdon titled "The American Republic or the Israelite Republic is a model for the American states," which broke the logjam, caused them to ratify it, and they were the last state to do so, bringing it into full legal effect. That I think America is a model, and tellingly has a 400-year period. If you look at, if you consider the Mayflower Compact in 1620 to be really the beginning of America as a Christian people, Christian nation, then it's exactly 400 years until the 2020 election, when I think we lost it. And trying to claw it back, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, the sequence of things that happens after that is unfolding right before us. After the Republic, you see the monarchy beginning with Saul, and then David. So.
And I think, it's significant that the temple has always been a flashpoint. It's always been a trouble spot for the Israelis and for the people around them.
Yeah.
The Romans didn't like it at all, destroyed it finally. Jesus was not very happy about how it was being used by the...
Oh, right. I mean, in the time of Josiah, by the time Josiah happened, the temple was completely given over to evil. Right. Every kind of demon worship and the worship of the stars and things on the roof.
Yeah. And he had to dig up the scrolls from under under the muck or something.
Right. Oh, and to the point of the titles, and the sort of this theme of sort of the dark side of the temple history. We've got to remember that the second temple was much considerably less in terms of stature and beauty than Solomon's, and it was Herod the Great, who was a wicked man, who actually expanded that temple. He's the one who turned the second temple into something more spectacular, but he's the same guy who slaughtered the entire royal family of the Hasmoneans, right? The descendants of the Maccabees, and tried to kill Jesus as an infant, right? So he's the guy that actually built that turned the second temple into what it was. And then the third temple is being built at a time when the sacrifices had ended because Christ died on the cross and drank a cup of wrath. And so even though it's the Jews doing it within their own perspective of the continuing of Judaism, it gets taken over by the Antichrist, who sets up the abomination of desolation if it's in the temple and not just an altar. So there is this sort of dark side of the history of the temple, even all the way back to Solomon, right there.
That's when they have to keep building it over again.
Yeah. So anyway, that's we're over time. Things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. Hebrews 8:5, who served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, he said that thou make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. Right? Yeah. Hebrews, great book.
Right. We need a tabernacle, but not necessarily a temple.
Yes. So anyway, that's it. We're done for this week. God bless you. We will see you again next Saturday at 4 p.m. Central Time. God bless you.
Have a wonderful resurrection.
Yes, wonderful. He will be risen as of tomorrow morning. God bless you.